Hello all, in this lesson we're going to be talking about percentages. So first thing we want to talk about is what does the word percent mean? Per means out of, and cent, if you think about century or how many cents there are in a dollar, that refers to 100. So these are going to be all proportions out of 100. Okay, let's look at one example and we'll see what this looks like. Rob's fruit farm consists of 100 acres on which 3 different types of apples grow. On 25 acres, the farm grows Empire apples. Macintosh apples grow on 30% of the farm, and the remainder of the farm grows Fuji apples. Shade in the grid below to represent the portion of the farm each type of apple occupies. Use a different color for each type of apple. Create a key to identify which color represents each type of apple. Okay, so if you don't have colors, you can just go ahead and use letters. So I'm going to go ahead and start with, we had some Empire apples. So I'm going to go ahead and mark those as E. So we could continue doing this, and I'm sure you can all understand if we keep doing this, we would fill in 10 there, and then we would fill in 10 more here. And then I'm going to start from the bottom, put 5 more E's there. So all of this region would be E for Empire. We'll call that right now, it's in my blue pen. Okay, so then we'll move on and say that 30% of the farm is Macintosh. Okay, so the Macintosh, we can go ahead and we're in this red color, so red's for our key here. And I'm going to go ahead and mark these as M. I'm going to start from this side just to kind of keep it clean. And 30% is really, as we talked about, out of 100. So if there's 100 here, we really need to shade in 30 of these squares. So M's here, M's all the way down here, and M's here as well. So all of those first three, or right 3 columns are going to be M's. Lastly, we'll go ahead and do Fuji's, and I'm going to do this in green. And the Fuji's, you could just mark with F's, are going to be all the rest of this region in the middle here. Great, lots of Fuji apples. So green, Fuji apples all in the middle. Okay, great. So let's now establish a part to whole ratio for each of these. So they told us straight up that there was 25 Empire apples out of 100. So 25 to 100. That would simplify, of course, to 1 to 4. For our red Macintosh apples, there was 30 to 100. Or we could simplify that as 3 to 10. And lastly, we have to kind of do a little bit of math. If there's 25 and 30 of the other apples, that's a total of 55 apples. So there's 45 of the Fuji's to 100. And that would go with a 9 to 20 ratio of Fuji apples. Great. So that's kind of a visual to go with percents, but let's continue. Percentages really are just another way that we can represent a decimal or a fraction. So the table below here has where we're going to kind of try to represent the same number in different contexts. So they gave us that 6% is our percentage, and they gave us a ratio of 6 out of 100. Well, what decimal would that represent? Well, if it's 6 out of 100, that's 6 hundredths. So our decimal equivalent is 0.06, putting 6 in the hundredths place. As a fraction, if it's 6 out of 100, it's just 6 out of 100. So if we wanted to show a model for 6%, we'd want to start with a nice big square here, and we'd want to make 100 little boxes. I'll be honest, making this on my tablet is quite difficult, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that you can understand that there's 10 columns and 10 rows here, and I'm just going to show 6 of them shaded in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 6. So 6 out of a total of 100 would be shaded in. Great. 60%, that's 60 out of 100. Sometimes that might be the next place to go to is the fraction from the percentage. And as a ratio, We could start off with 60 to 100, but we would want to simplify that. You might start by going 6 to 10, but you'd realize that that can go even further, as 3 to 5 would be our most simplified ratio. So if we got 60 hundredths, so we could kind of simplify this fraction already, and you could kind of see it as 6 tenths. That would be our decimal equivalent. 6 tenths, or you could add a 0 here to say 60 hundredths. Either one would be the same. Now for our model, we don't need a 100 square grid. We just need a 10 square strip. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that should be 10 segments there. So I'm going to shade in 6 of them, and each one would really represent 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that would be 60 out of 6 out of 10, or 60 out of 100. They're both equivalent. Now what happens on this next example where we're given 600%? That's more than 100. So it's still, this number is the number out of 100. So we can start with 600 over 100. Well, if we had to simplify 600 over 100 or divide 600 over 100, we would just get 6, a whole number. And so we can see when we have a percentage that's over 100, we're going to get a number that's greater than 1. Okay, so what would be our ratio here? It would be 6. We could start with 600 to 100, but that's going to simplify down to 6 to 1. For the visual, we're going to make 6 separate boxes. And the reason why this is kind of different than 6 boxes out of something else is each of these boxes is its own whole. So if they're all kind of connected, we can kind of interpret that as one whole broken into pieces. These are separate individual boxes, so these are each 100%, so 6 of them makes 600%.